Hey ho, and welcome to this quick overview of a couple of DungeonCrawler's gridders, where I just wanted to show the movement, as there was a discussion in Discord, or a question in Discord, and I just wanted to check how this is actually processed in the crawlers which came to mind, which have animations between the different steps. So dungeon crawlers, these are all grid-based games where you're moving step by step. And in a chronological order, we are taking a look at 6 different games today, starting with Lands of Lore. And in this game, you have to use the, well, you can use the numpad. You can see when turning, and as when I played it as a kid, I didn't really realize it. But I think if you really slow-mo the video or check it frame by frame, the transition between the frames when turning looks a bit glitchy, and maybe this is by DOSBox, but I think this is just how it works because it's not a 3D engine. In any case, this game allows, well, a little buffering, so if I move forward and move forward again right away, this is actually saved and processed. So I don't need to wait until the movement to the next field is complete, so there is a little buffer. And the game is also turning the move into somewhat of a fluent movement, but not really. So I think it's really not intended to do it that way. Maybe it's just accepting like DOS commands, and like in a text, in DOS for example, if you press A, you have A, and then at one point you just spam A's, and I think it's like that. I don't think that's intended to be used that way. So it also doesn't look great, and it keeps like the forward movement queued up like multiple times. And yeah, this is not working great here. Because the movement is so quick, and I think it just uses one frame as transition. I think it's quick enough that you would never use that. I don't think I ever used it in the past. And because it's also queuing the movement, it feels very good, and you would never come to the idea to hold the button. In any case, this was Lands of Lore, and now we will jump over to the next game. Alright, the next one is Anvil of Dawn. And you can see step-based movement. Oh. Of the no, there's yeah. And I think this might already be a full 3D engine. Well, full in the regard of the like how the level is set up. Because of course the enemies are also sprites, and some of the stuff is definitely pre-rendered, like this, the corridors themselves and how they are looking. In any way, you can also see that turning actually has more frames than Lands of Lore had. You can see that we have step-based movement. You can also see that we have buffering. And I would say very generous one. So as long as I click a second time when I'm moving, the second step is also executed. And if I hold the forward key, then it's a continuous movement without that you could see where the different tiles are. Well, besides of the level layout, of course. But it's a very fluid movement. So that's Anvil of Dawn from Lands of Lore was 93, and this is 95. And now we will get to the next game from 95, which is Stonekeep. So, alright. This one also has like 2D, 3D environment, but this should... I guess it's... What? This is, I guess, all recorded, but I'm... well, it is some kind of 2D, 3D mix. But yeah, if we move forward, so we have multiple frames when turning. It's a nice transition. If I move forward, step by step, you can see that we have step-by-step movements, step-based movements. So now I'm going to check if there's a buffer. Forward, 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 forward. Nope. Forward, forward. So there is a buffer, but it is very short. It's like the last fifth or so, if at all. It feels good, but it's definitely not as generous of a buffer like in Anvil of Dawn. What I especially like in Stonekeep is the sound if you have continuous movement. Now I don't have, I mean I'm running in circles here and the paths here aren't really that big. But I think you can already hear it a little bit. If I keep the button pressed, you have these steps which get louder. And you can really hear that not just the movement is transitioning to a continuous movement, but it's also the sound which is changing, which is very nice. And this is one of the things which I remember Stonekeep for, is the great atmosphere and the sound design. I mean, just the turning around. And like what you hear from the feet is just great. Yeah, but from the controls and graphics, you have again step-based movement with, well, a very short buffer, and you have continuous movement where you can't see the steps at all anymore. And yeah, that's Stonekeep, the last one from the olden days. Now we will get to a little bit newer crawlers. So next up is Legend of Grimrock from 2012, and actually this comes to a bit of a surprise. I wasn't expecting that the movement felt rather bad. I mean, it's still okay, but compared to Anvil of Dawn and Stonekeep, it's and also the other games I will still show you, this one feels a bit not so great, because you can see and of course feel a clear stutter between the steps. And actually you can't see my hand there because I have to use that one. So first of all, moving forward step by step and going back. Now I try the buffering. Forward, 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 forward. So there's a decent buffering. Yeah. Yeah, there. So as soon as you're on the second field and press forward, even if it's just, if you just entered the second field, it will execute the second step, which is fine with me. And if you hold the key and you have a continuous movement, you can still clearly see the steps, but it comes to really, it feels like a really artificial hold, because it has some kind of fluent movement, then you have a very brief artificial hard stop, and then it goes forward again. And this doesn't feel too great. I would say actually even the worst out of these games, besides of Lands of Lore. That was horrible if it is queuing up multiple steps, but I don't think in Lands of Lore it's intended to be used that way. So, yeah, there's a little freeze in between the different steps, which, in my opinion, is not that great. But yeah, that was Legend of Grimrock from 2012. And next up is The Fall of the Dungeon Guardians. And yeah, step-based movement here. Step, 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 step. Now we check the buffering, or the caching, or whatever you want to call it. So forward, 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 forward. So same as Grimrock, as soon as you're on the second field and you press forward again, it will move forward. And same for turning. Forward turning, forward turning, forward turning. So there's that. And with holding the button, and that's different to Grimrock, it feels much better. You have a continuous movement, and actually you have a very nice left, right, left, right. So you can really, it feels like a normal, like, yeah, movement, a very authentic movement. So I much prefer this over over the artificial stops in between, like in Grimrock. I mean, a little bit of artificial step, step, step is fine, but in Grimrock there's a very harsh block between the tiles, which I don't like. So that's Fall of the Dungeon Guardians from 2015. And now we've got one game left. And that last game has to be Operencia from 2019. And in here we also have, well, step-based, forward, 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 forward. Alright. What I really do not like in Operencia is the turning. I don't think that's feeling great. So when I played the game, I just used the walking by keyboard, but I actually looked around with mouse because I found that to be much more pleasant than this whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So yeah, I don't like the turning at all, but the movement itself is fine. So forward, forward, forward with clear interrupts, and now I'm trying to check if there's a buffer. Forward, 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 forward. There's not as a clear buffer as in Grimrock and in Fall of the Dungeon Guardians, but forward, forward. So there is a buffer, but it's like the last, I don't know, third or 20% or something of a tile. And if I hold the forward button, it's going into a continuous fluent movement. Not with this left, right as in Fall of the Dungeon Guardians, but it's still doing fine, I would say. Also feeling much better than in Legend of Grimrock. And yeah, that was the last game I had in mind. Of course, there are lots of other games I could have checked. For example, Might Magic 10 or Starcrawlers. Yeah, I mean there are several more. I don't remember if Starcrawlers actually has transitions between the tiles. It probably has because it's a 3D engine, Vaporum, and so on. But this is it for for this demonstration. I mean, you can already see all the games actually have a buffer. I mean, they have a different buffer timer. Sometimes the it accepts new movements or saves new movements as soon as you are on the new tile. like in Fall of the Dungeon Guardians or Legend of Grimrock. Sometimes it's only accepted if it is on the very last centimeters of the current tile, like in Operencia, but I think it was also in Stonekeep that way. All the games except of Lands of Lore allow for a continuous movement, though Lands of Lore is probably kind of a weird case, because I don't think it's really made for that. I mean, if you look around and just because you have one frame in between, I don't think it's really made for that. So maybe you shouldn't count it into that. From the other 5 games, all games allow continuous movement, and I would also say that in all games the movement is very clear forward without steps, except of Legend of Grimrock, where you have a very harsh cut. I mean, it almost goes fluent to the next tile, and then there's a very spontaneous harsh cut in between the tiles, which kind of makes it unpleasant. So, I mean, the controls are still fine. It's not like it's unplayable or whatever, and it has a buffer, which is much more important. Yeah, but I would prefer the movement from these other games. Well, besides all these turning, which I don't like. But yeah, that's it for today. Just wanted to show movement of different crawlers during the last 30 years with transition from tiles to tiles. I hope that this was very enlightening, and so yeah, I thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.